Here. And Governor Watley.
Here.
Chair Colson, you have perfect attendance and a quorum.
Wonderful. I want to begin by thanking Florida A&M University for hosting this meeting. We have not been on Florida A&M's campuses. I have joined the board, and it's nice to get to see one of the oldest campuses in our system. Thank you to the FAMU staff and Interim President Robinson for the warm welcome. And I want to say a few words about how pleased I am that Dr. Robinson has agreed to stay at the helm of FAMU for a bit longer. I've gotten to know Dr. Robinson in the past.
Here.
Governor Rood.
Here.
Governor Tripp.
Here.
Governor Webster. Here. And Governor Watley.
Here.
Chair Colson, you have perfect attendance and a quorum.
Wonderful. I want to begin by thanking Florida A&M University for hosting this meeting. We have not been on Florida A&M's campuses. I have joined the board, and it's nice to get to see one of the oldest campuses in our system. Thank you to the FAMU staff and Interim President Robinson for the warm welcome. And I want to say a few words about how pleased I am that Dr. Robinson has agreed to stay at the helm of FAMU for a bit longer. I've gotten to know Dr. Robinson in the past 6 months, and FAMU is fortunate to have such a steady and committed leader. At this critical stage, FAMU needs a stabilizing force to lead it through not only the SACS probation, but also the corrective action plan that the board has set forth. And that stability is strengthened by keeping Dr. Robinson. Dr. Robinson, would you like to say a few words?
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Colson, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing me to welcome you formally to the campus of Florida A&M University. We just celebrated 125 years of excellence with caring, and we look forward to another 125. I would like to formally invite you on the behalf of our Board of Trustees, our board chairs here, our students, our faculty, staff, and alumni to the first co-educational public institution in the state of Florida. I really want to thank the Chancellor and his staff for the collaborative partnership that we've established in this last 6 months period to work on a number of issues of importance to the system of Florida as well as the university, of course. And so I want to thank the Chancellor and his staff, and I'm pretty sure you'll hear a little bit more about that later. So welcome to the campus. We look forward to you having a productive meeting, and if there's anything else that we can do for you, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's been a wonderful visit. I would like to officially welcome one of our new members of the board, Commissioner Tony Bennett. Commissioner Bennett has been a high school teacher and basketball coach, district superintendent, and state superintendent in Indiana. He received his doctorate degree in education and his superintendent's license from Spalding University. He earned a certificate in secondary administration and supervision, a master's of science in secondary education, and a bachelor of science in secondary education from Indiana University Southeast. We are fortunate to have Commissioner Bennett in Florida. Welcome, Commissioner, and would you be glad to say a few words?
Thank you. Just thanks. It's great to be in Florida, and we're thrilled to be serving the board.
Great to have you a part. I want to recognize Governor Norman Tripp, who was reappointed to the board for a second term. Congratulations, Governor Tripp. We look forward to your continued wisdom, and I'm not going to ask you to give a speech. Next, I would like to thank Speaker Weatherford for joining us this morning. His visit is a testament to the fact that our elected officials are committed to making the state university system the best system in the country. In his opening day speech, Speaker Weatherford said that Florida needs nationally acclaimed universities. The Speaker and the higher education leaders in the House have remained true to that idea by sponsoring legislation to provide funding for our board to support our preeminent universities and to assist those universities in their climb toward excellence. The House also has incorporated this board's ideas about how to build on the reputation that Florida has for being a leader in online education while better coordinating online degree programs and capitalizing on the global reputation of a preeminent institution to develop internationally competitive online programs. Speaker Weatherford has challenged our system to think differently, and we as a board are prepared to take that challenge. I want to thank Speaker Weatherford, the members of the House Higher Education and Workforce Subcommittee, its Chair, Jeanette Nunez, the members of the House Education Subcommittee, especially Representative Marlene O'Toole and Chair Eric Fresen, for the support they have shown this board and the state university system. I also want to thank President Gates, the members of the Senate Committee on Education, its Chair, Senator Legg, the members of the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Education, and its Chair, Senator Galvano, for their support of higher education and the Board of Governors. The Senate has not only restored the $300 million to our university, but has also provided continued funding for the IT performance funding pilot. The Senate has also shown support for our preeminent universities by providing funding for our board to launch our top-tier universities to greater national status. Governor Scott has also placed a priority on our universities. He provided an additional $290 million for the state university system and recognized the work that our board has been doing on developing a performance funding metrics to reward universities for improving graduation rates and ensuring that students get high-wage employment in Florida. Our board and our system have enjoyed unparalleled support this session from our partners in the legislative and executive branches. We are all moving toward the same goal of making our system the best system in the country. With their cooperation, the state university system will continue to provide an affordable, high-quality educational experience for our students in Florida. Now, I get to do one of the fun things you get to do as chair of this board. I get to go to the podium and ask Ava Parker to join me. This is the first time we've been able to be with Ava since she stepped down from our board. Ava was an inaugural member of the board. Ava began service in 2003. Her contributions included serving as chair of the Facilities and Real Estate Committee, chair of the Audit and Compliance Committee, vice chair of the Budget, Finance, and Operations Committee, vice chair of the board, and chair of the board. Ava participated in the tremendous growth of this board as it worked hard to establish itself after its initial devolution of authority to the Board of Trustees. Ava was chair when the board reached the historic governance agreement with the legislature and the governor, and the good relationship that we have with both today is in no small part thanks to her strong leadership. Under Ava's leadership, the board also worked with the universities to tackle the difficult issue of how to handle academic program coordination and system structure. The board now has a regulatory framework to guide us in addressing these thorny issues. We also developed a system strategic plan during Ava's term as chair that will guide our work through 2025. Her transformative leadership will be felt in the work of this board for decades to come. As a small token of our appreciation, the board passed a resolution in January honoring Ava's service. Everyone, please stand and give a round of applause to Ava Parker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the members of the board. When we started this system, I actually started as a member of the Board of Trustees for the University of Central Florida. I was there with Dr. Hitt, and I recall that on the day that we made the full announcement, someone sat next to me and said to me that you will learn that the best community service you can offer your state is service to the state university system. And now over 10 years later, I can say that she was right, that this was an opportunity to impact our children, our families, and the economic growth of our state. I can't think of anything else that you can do that will give you that kind of opportunity. So I miss the Board of Governors because I was married, I had twins, all that while being a part of this board. And I just thank you for the opportunity to serve, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having me come today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of January 17th? So moved. Second. Any additions, deletions? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the conference call held on February 21st?
So moved. Second.
Any additions, deletions? If not, all in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion passes. Chancellor's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to reciprocate. Thank you very much to Florida A&M University for their hospitality. As I'm always fond of saying, these things are complicated to put together, and they can only happen efficiently and effectively, allowing this board and the universities to do their important work if the behind-the-scenes work is done appropriately. And the people at Florida A&M have been very accommodating and very helpful to our staff, who always work hard to move into a university virtually before these meetings and get them ready for operational status. Thank you to Chair Badger, to President Robinson, and to all the good people through them at Florida A&M University. We appreciate the hospitality very, very much. Congratulations, as always, again on the 125th anniversary of Florida A&M. A little later in the program, we're going to hear from the Secretary of State about the 500th anniversary of the state of Florida, not as a state, but our 500-year anniversary of existence, and to know that it is at the same time the 125th anniversary of Florida A&M University, I think, is worth special note. So happy anniversary to you all as well. I have several things, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to do. First of all, is an acknowledgement. As most of you know, and perhaps some of you don't, not only are we off and running in the world of online education, as we just talked about with our speaker, but for some time, Florida has been getting notoriety in its own way on another important issue, that of automated library services. Libraries are usually very quiet in the way they go about their business, but ask any of these men and women at the end of the table and they will tell you, pull the libraries out of the university, either the physical and traditional library or the online services provided to faculty, students, communities, and you have virtually ripped the heart from the world of academic learning and teaching. By virtue of that fact, we also know that libraries, too, are looking to keep pace with the technological advancements that we're seeing in our nation and in our world. But for some time, we have offered automated library services to those in need. But just about a year ago, we began another very important process. Also, like online education, working from a platform of what we have been doing and determining how we could take it to a next level. And we recognized we couldn't take it to a next level without better coordinating the library services that were being provided in automated fashion through our state university system, through our Florida college system, and others. And so began a very, very long journey, it seems, over how we could accomplish that. I cannot say enough about all of the great people at the universities, at the state level, and this includes people from the legislative process, especially staff, who have worked to create what we believe, when we finally accomplish it, is going to be the finest automated set of library services anywhere in this country. That's a bold statement, but I can make it for two reasons. One, nothing like it exists in the country today by way of vision. And number two, once we accomplish it, we will be, by virtue of that fact, the runaway finest state in the country relative to automated library services. Just like online education, they come in two forms. One, direct information, but also the services necessary to navigate. And that's what we are accomplishing here. For years, we've had automated services through the Florida college system, through the state university system, and back at the house services to students provided through something called fax.org. All of that has now been pulled together under one new governance structure that we have begun to implement. And two very key decisions were made along the way. And I will tell you, Commissioner, that the Chancellor Hanna and I have been real partners in this effort, because that had to happen as well. But our folks working together, more importantly, have helped to make all of this happen. One of the decisions that was made early on was to bring in someone by the name of Jane Hayes. And Jane, are you in the audience today? Someone told me that you might be joining us. This is Jane Hayes, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you about her. Jane has a long and illustrious career behind her in the Florida legislature as a staff member. But she agreed that she would come into service here to help oversee the origination of the new movement toward the library automation system under the heading of the Florida Library Virtual Campus, as it was originally dubbed. She provided us the experience, the stability, and the wisdom to take what was at one point a fractionalized, siloed system of library services and automation and help formulate the strong foundation from which we now work. And so, Jane, I did want to recognize you, and as you step away from that role, as we have now secured the services of a permanent executive director for the FLVC, and I think he might be here today, and I'll take that risk as well. Is Don Machino with us today? Nancy, do you know? He couldn't be. But Don was the one who applied for and ultimately was selected the new executive director of the Florida Library Virtual Campus, and is now going to take all of the work done by Jane and everyone else throughout the state system and move it to the next level. But Jane, I couldn't get away from all of this without saying a very special thank you for your leadership in a very vulnerable and important time in what I am convinced, once we design the technological blueprint, take it to the street, and acquire the services of a world-class technology company who will put in place with us the best automated library system and services in the United States. Jane, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much for your contributions to this effort, and we wish Don Machino and his wonderful people all the best as we work with them in the future. Jane, thanks very much for what you did for us. Like the chair and others, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to welcome all of our new members, thank them for attending the orientation that we put together at our offices in the Department of Education building yesterday. I hope that they found that information and that experience useful. It is hard to decide when you're starting with someone on this journey, where do you begin for an orientation when you're dealing with a job that is as massive as is this one. But the good news is the governor has provided us some very smart and experienced people, and it made our job providing that orientation session a little bit easier. So I really do hope that you not only enjoyed it and found it informational, we hope that you'll debrief us so that when we do orientations in the future, we can make sure that they're even better than the one that you went through yesterday. Same with our new Board of Trustee members. We had an orientation here at Florida A&M University for about 50% of the newly ensconced Board of Trustee members from around our state university system. Again, we've honed that process over and over. We hope that they found it useful, but we're going to be working with them to debrief them to see if there were things we could have done better or that we should add to their arsenal of orientation for the future. So thank you again. And lastly, on the issue of orientation, I continually want to thank Governor Husseini, who not only heads up that committee, but has put a premium price tag on the issue of orientation, recognizing that you can never assume, as talented, as smart, and as experienced as are all of these new members, that they can simply come to the table and do their work. Everyone needs an orientation beginning a new job to make sure that they can hit the ground running and start with adequate information. Our own universities will do orientations for their own trustees, but we always think it's important, and again, this is thanks to the leadership of Governor Husseini and the board, that they also get an orientation from us and with us, recognizing how important they're going to be by way of partnership with their institution and the Board of Governors moving forward. So thank you, Governor Husseini, for your constant attention to that issue. I too want to thank Commissioner Bennett. I know that we've thanked all the new members, but having not only done that job, not as well as he will do it, but also knowing that the statute book is full of the phrase Commissioner of Education, especially as it relates to virtually every committee and commission and task force you can possibly imagine. The Commissioner of Education by title is a member. for him not only to be here, but to be as fully engaged with us as he's been since the day he got here, quite literally, says a lot about him, and we thank him for his commitment. The connectivity between pre-K through 12 and what we do in higher education should be inescapably obvious to everyone, but I know it is absolutely that obvious to him, and we appreciate his engagement and his involvement. I want to quickly let you know, because we've talked about this one, how important health and STEM continue to be to the State University, and yet how inadequate we sometimes feel in the board office based on the amount of attention we're able to give it. It could largely be argued that health, for example, all things health in the State University, when combined, is the largest effort that we have on any particular issue. When you consider medical schools, nursing schools, all the affiliate programs from occupational therapy and so on, that when you put it together, it is a gigantic part of what we do in the State University system. So after much discussion, especially with our leadership, we have decided that we were, with the help of the legislative funding last year, now able to post a position, one inside the organization that will, on a daily basis, work on issues of health, health-related activities, and STEM education important to health, but also be able to hire, ultimately, someone who can come in on a contract basis, work with all of our universities, and help shape the first strategic plan on health in the history of the State University. Work with our deans of the colleges of education, the deans of nursing, work with all of the people in the health-related areas, and the presidents, provost, universities to create a strategic plan for the future of all things health in the State University system as we move forward. So we will be putting those up on the wall in the very near future, and hopefully soon be able to introduce to all of you the folks that will help provide us the leadership on a daily basis on these issues, and we're very excited about that. Lastly, two issues have gained great notoriety across the country over the last several weeks. We always like to be very important to the people in this country and the state university systems for things that are positive and noteworthy, but we also know, because of the magnitude of our operation, being the second largest state university in the country, that from time to time we're going to have events that bring us notoriety that doesn't make us very happy. And such has been the case, even as we have rocketed to prominence in areas, as the chairman mentioned, of things like intercollegiate sport, basketball most notably of late. We would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge also some of those things that have brought us notoriety, the kind of which we'd rather not have. First of all, much has been written, much has been said about the incident at Florida Atlantic University recently. I just received a letter from the governor asking us to look into this issue much further, but I can assure everyone that I have spoken with regularly and at length President Saunders about this issue since it began to unfold and directly in its aftermath. She has committed to me regularly that as far as they are concerned, this issue is not closed out. They need to continue to debrief this issue. They will ultimately provide to me a full report of everything that has transpired and any action ultimately that they believe they needed to take or will be taking in the future to reconcile it totally. I, of course, will send that on to the governor when I receive it at his request, but most importantly, make certain that, as everyone here does at their institutions, whenever there is something that happens of significance, it has to be looked at closely as a teachable moment, not only to deal with the issue at hand, but also to look forward to make certain that if it's possible, it never happen again, or that we learn lessons from these issues that make our universities better places for our students. I want to acknowledge the work of the people at Florida Atlantic University. They have been in the crosshairs of the national press regularly over the last couple of weeks on these issues, but I will tell you they continue to stand strong in making certain that every day what's most important to them is the health, safety, and welfare of their students, their faculty, their staff, and visitors to their universities. I also will say that we also have to be mindful, as nobody knows this better than the presidents, that whenever we're dealing with issues surrounding students, much of what goes on surrounding those students is protected by federal law. It's always great to be able to say, let me tell you everything that happened so that everyone will know. We covet transparency, but at the end of the day, we also know that the first obligation is to protect our students and their confidentiality rights. Not only because it's the morally correct thing to do, but there is federal law that protects exactly that. So while some will still be unsatisfied, perhaps, that they don't know every single thing that has transpired at Florida Atlantic University, they need to know that they have not only been given all of the information they can be given, but at the same time that that which they cannot receive for protection rights is being dealt with appropriately at the same time. As you freely read, Florida Atlantic University has apologized for those things they feel as though they need to apologize for, committed to making whatever change they need to make, and that the student, and I can say this in this case because it's been written, seems to be satisfied with the apologies and the actions that have been taken subsequently by Florida Atlantic University. The other issue that we have been dealing with, tragically, involved loss of life. Having been a university president, I can tell you there is no greater issue with which we deal at universities than any loss of life, especially that of a student, regardless of the circumstance. This particular case, however, quickly caught national attention because it not only involved a student loss of life, but the potential loss of life of who knows how many other students. And I, too, want to join the many who have recognized what I consider to be the outstanding efforts of President Hitt, and through him, all of the people at the University of Central Florida for their rapid response, but also how professionally they have dealt with all of the events that have unfolded since that particular day. Not a way you want to achieve notoriety. I know you'd rather be in the Final Four, Mr. President, but at the end of the day, you know, we learned so many valuable lessons in the wake of Virginia Tech. We purchased equipment, we hired new personnel, we did different training than we've ever done before, different technological advancements to be able to notify people during and after events that sadly will always transpire in a system as big as ours. But at the end of the day, I think this was a wonderful opportunity in the wake of this tragedy to recommit to people that we will never rest. While anything of this nature can happen, we're always going to look for a better way to assure the long-term health, safety, and welfare of the people involved in our state university system. But at this point, I did want to acknowledge by name not only President Hitt, and I'm going to give him a chance in just a moment to talk about this, but I wanted to also acknowledge someone who I think very quietly made a huge difference in all of these events. A gentleman by the name of Arobi Babukani, who happened to be the roommate of the student who ended up taking his own life. And I think we haven't given enough attention to the fact that had this young man not had the wherewithal to make a 911 call to law enforcement, and because of the already rapid response of the University of Central Florida Police Department, who were already on scene physically when that call was made, the confluence of that young man's courage to do so. And when people say, well, of course he made a call to 911, who wouldn't? You'd be surprised how many people wouldn't. He did. And because he did, and because of the rapid response of the police at the University of Central Florida, I am totally convinced that the confluence of those two events took us in a totally different direction and created a totally different outcome from the one that perhaps had been mapped out in the mind of a young man who was obviously gravely disturbed. So, Mr. President, thank you for your leadership, but I know through you, thank you to everybody at the University of Central Florida and your first responders and all of those who worked in the wake of this tragedy to make sure that it didn't get to be worse and that health, safety, and welfare is your #1 priority.
Well, thank you, Chancellor. Just to
remind people of the events. Early on the morning of March 18, a fire alarm was received from our residence, Tower 1, and then as the Chancellor indicated, shortly thereafter, a 911 call from Tower 1 reported that B.K. Babakari had encountered his roommate, who pointed a kind of a assault rifle at him, a .22 Magnum assault rifle at him. He then retreated into his bedroom and had the presence of mind to make the 911 call, which let the police who were on the way know that they weren't just there to respond to a fire alarm. There was an armed person there in that area, so that changed everything. We are very gratified that the response was so quick, and I would agree, Chancellor, that probably threw the young man who was planning the shooting spree off pace and led to his taking his own life. It's tragic when any life is lost, but if one had to be lost in this instance, I think we would all agree that the right one was lost. I mean, he planned apparently to take other lives. Police responded, got into the room, found James Oliver Siva Kumaran as an apparent suicide in his third floor student suite. They immediately evacuated the building. As Orange County police came on the scene, they discovered 4 IEDs, 2 guns, and approximately 1,000 rounds of ammunition in the room of the dead student. A university-wide alert was sent out with follow-up alerts and web updates. We closed the university that Monday until noon to secure the area. Our police chief, Richard Berry, who really did a wonderful job in all of this by my lights, invited in Orange County Sheriff, FDLA, the FBI, ATF, and others. They joined the investigation. Resident advisors and professionals from the University Counseling Center aided students in need. We held a news conference Monday afternoon to thank all first responders and counselors. University officials responded to questions from the press, tried to be as transparent as we could in the matter. And we were able to get students back into the dorm later in the day, and I think everybody was back by Monday evening, even onto the 3rd floor where the shooting incident took place. I would just have to say that the planning we did post Virginia Tech, all of the efforts that went into forming, not just on our campus, but on other campuses, crisis management teams, carefully rehearsing responses to an emergency instance like this, really paid off. The protocols that we had put in place and trained on and rehearsed worked. Now, what we're going to be doing in response to these events is to look carefully at all of our actions, and not just the actions of first responders, but how we dealt with the needs of students in the aftermath. It's how we informed students, the campus community, and the general public. I'd be confident, as with any kind of large-scale action, we will find areas that we could do better. And that's certainly our intent, is to improve any areas where we find that we can make improvements. We certainly thank our first responders. In my mind, they really had a very large role in averting what could have been a terrible tragedy by their professional conduct. I've got to single out our housing and residence life students, along with our professional counselors, the staff who serve them, for the hours they spent supporting the students who live in Tower 1 and the other student residence halls around the campus. We believe that the incident was handled with great professionalism by many individuals. But we also know that, again, there's much we can learn in the aftermath, and we have vowed to use the experience to make our campus even better prepared, more alert, more secure. To that end, we're undergoing a thorough review of our crisis management policies and procedures. We're also conducting a critical analysis of our incident response operations. What we've learned from the incident itself, what we're learning in our ongoing review, we believe may be helpful to other institutions in our state university system. We also know that in this critical area there are lessons that we can learn from our colleagues around the state. Consequently, UCF is prepared to hold a 1 or 2 day workshop at UCF this summer. I would target late June or July, and at which we will share best practices in emergency preparedness, crisis management, and incident response. We have tentative commitments to participate in such a security workshop from national experts in the field, from the major attractions, tourist attractions in our area. As you can imagine, Disney, Universal, SeaWorld have large-scale operations, very potentially vulnerable to this kind of incident, and they've got a lot of expertise in how to respond, and they have indicated a willingness to work with us. So we would also want to include in the conference the expertise that other institutions in our system could share. I hope you will let me know if your institutions are interested in participating in such an effort, and we'll begin the coordination and the planning process. Again, Mr. Chairman, we'd much rather deal with happy news than this. I would note that in the area of security and law enforcement, we got a pleasant surprise day before yesterday. We learned that Julia Pearson, a 30-year veteran of our Secret Service, National Secret Service, is the new director of the Secret Service. First woman ever appointed and first UCF Knight ever appointed as director of the Secret Service. So we got a little pleasant surprise there. We really appreciate that opportunity to celebrate having a native Orlandoan and a 1981 graduate in criminal justice become the head of the Secret Service. Thank you, sir. Congratulations.
And thank you, Mr. President. And lastly, but importantly, we've acknowledged how busy it is up that hill right now, and we've had the speaker here. I also wanted to acknowledge and invite to the podium a gentleman who physically, I suppose, lives in the shadow of the University of Central Florida, Representative Saunders, and represents that area. He contacted us in the direct aftermath of the events at the University of Central Florida regarding not only the incident itself, but again, the whole question of where are we today on issues of safety and security. And I think this idea that has been promoted by President Hitt about getting all of the universities and others together this summer to take up our ongoing efforts to share best practice and ideas is a wonderful idea. So Representative Saunders, we're delighted to have you here today, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me one brief moment to speak with you. I will share that the district I represent is in Northeast Orange County, House District 49. I'm a newly elected representative. And for the first time, UCF's entire campus, the main campus, is entirely within this one district. So most of my constituents, many of the people and parents who live in my area have a very, very deep connection to UCF. And so you can imagine the responses I've been getting to what was an averted disaster, an averted travesty. I enter into the legislature in an interesting time. It was just really in the last 2 years that we've seen incidences of mass violence that have sent shockwaves through the state and through the country. It was just in 2011 that Gabby Gifford was attacked in Arizona. It wasn't that long ago that we saw the travesty at Sandy Hook. And certainly the backdrop and the backstory for those of us who care a lot about the state university system is what happened at Virginia Tech not that long ago. There's an important fact that I think is we need to just put out into the ether about what happened at UCF. It's very clear that the person who ended up shooting himself was going to replicate a Virginia Tech style shooting. There's evidence that he had a checklist, that there were things he was going to do, and that the thing that would happen right before he began attacking students on campus was he would pull the fire alarm in the dorm room. He had pulled the fire alarm in the dorm room. And what's maybe one of the most important things we can acknowledge is that had the UCF Police Department not had a 3-minute response time from the moment that they received that 911 call to the moment that the sirens were outside of the dorm and they were making it clear they were about to enter, had that 3-minute response time been a 5-minute response time or a 10-minute response time, we would be having a very different conversation today. So I have to honor the UCF Police Department for their incredible work, and I hope that you'll join me in honoring them. I do also think that that response time was as much a result of their internal processes as it was the forethought that our entire UCF leadership team has put into what it takes to manage crisis on campus in moments like this. And I've heard a lot about what the entire system did post Virginia Tech. And I think what we're hearing is that there's another moment to do that people are afraid. This is what I'm hearing from my district, that people are concerned and they're afraid, and there's a chance to step up and reevaluate and see what we can do better. And my guess is that as pitch perfect as the response was from UCF, even within the UCF family, we'll find things that could have been fixed, a moment in time, something that happened or didn't happen that could have been done better. And I think that this process that's been proposed by President Hitt is something that the entire state university system can learn from, and vice versa, that you all may have done things that UCF can learn from. The challenge that I wanted to just bring today is twofold. One, I really want to encourage you all that as you engage in the process at UCF, that you first check in with your own campuses. I think that this is a time when people are afraid. Again, these things have all happened in quick succession, and the threat of mass violence is out there, and people need, I think, time to process that. So creating an environment and a process where parents and students and faculty can all give the feedback that's necessary to then inform this process, I think matters, and I think it's worth doing. And I know Chancellor Brogan and I have had a great conversation about how important that is. The second thing that I'd like to encourage you to do, and maybe most importantly, is come out of the process at UCF this summer with legislative recommendations. I'm ready and willing to be a conduit for that, but if you all come out of that process and realize that there are X, Y, and Z things that have a price tag that you need support with to make sure that there is never a question about whether or not students will be safe, whether or not parents feel like they can send their kids to school and not have to worry, that there isn't really, in my opinion, a price tag that's too high. But if you can frame your work in a legislative frame to figure out how we can support you, I think there will be lots of support in the legislature for that kind of action. And this process leading into something that we do next session is a worthy path. So thank you for taking the time to have this very important issue. Thank you again to the leadership at UCF and President Hitt and your entire team. We could be having a very different conversation if we hadn't put the thought and time in. And I hope we come up with something great this summer.
Thank you, Representative Saunders. Thank you, President Hitt. Representative Saunders, you're always welcome here anytime to come back and visit with us on any occasion. The next item on our agenda is a brief informational item on Florida's 500th anniversary commemorating Ponce de Leon's landing on Florida's eastern coast and naming it La Florida, or La Florida, who knows. Joining us today is the Florida Humanities Council Treasurer, Steve Siebert. Mr. Siebert is the former head of the Florida Department of Community Affairs, a position he held from 1999 until 2003. He's a lawyer, graduate of the University of Florida. And Mr. Siebert, welcome, and will you introduce the people with you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chancellor, members of the board, thank you for these few minutes. I have the privilege to gather before you every 500 years to talk about this very important commemoration. This is a focal point. It's a focal point for scholarship and research. Virtually all of your institutions are playing a critical role in talking about the 500th anniversary of the European discovery of Florida. It is a focal point for community engagement, and by that I mean business, the academy, community groups, government, everyone is talking. This is the most collaborative effort I think I've ever seen. It is an opportunity for us to redefine our relationship with the country of Spain. And it's maybe for me the most important part of it is a focal point to continue to define Florida in its sense of place and its sense of history. I've got two people that are very important to this effort I'd like to introduce, and then I'll follow up with some closing comments and handle any questions. The first is Andy McLeod. Andy is a former board member of the Florida Humanities Council and is our coordinator for this effort, and we're lucky to have Carrie Post here as well. Carrie is the Deputy Secretary of State and leading the effort for the Department of State for Viva 500. So, let's go. Andy, I think you're first.
Good morning to you all. It's a pleasure to be here. I have the job of reducing and focusing your attention on 500 years in approximately 120 seconds. I will not dawdle. 1513, 500 years ago, next Tuesday, Ponce de Leon stepped on the Atlantic coast of Florida and dubbed it La Florida. I would like to orient you on this timeline. That was 1513. And thus we talk about 500 years, the quincentenary. We also know the date in Florida, 1565, which is the settlement of St. Augustine, the first permanent settlement in North America. Ponce de Leon was the first recorded European presence in what is now the continental United States. That is 500 years. In 2015, we celebrated as a state 450 years of St. Augustine's history. And so we have a 3-year window here from this year to 1513 of significant commemorations in Florida history. And that is what we are about. I am a native New Englander, and I have great fun with those in that part of the country because I have become quite convinced that the narrative of American history is only partially correct. Florida was being named and settled fully 100 years before the Pilgrims. As the great UF Florida Michael Gannon says, by the time the Pilgrims touched Plymouth Rock, St. Augustine was already into urban redevelopment. Fully 50 years prior to that, Ponce de Leon is coming to Florida. So this is a major milestone in national, and I would argue, world history. Some perspective on that. Within 10 years of that date, 1513, the following other events occurred. You noticed the installation of a new Pope 3 weeks ago. Where did that occur? That occurred in the Sistine Chapel. Who was finishing his painting of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in 1513? Michelangelo. What else happened within 10 years of 1513? Cortez begins to make war on the tribes of Mexico, on the Aztecs, and conquer Mexico. Núñez de Balboa looks across the isthmus and discovers the Pacific Ocean. Magellan circumnavigates the world, the first expedition to sail around the entire world, the first step in the era, arguably, of globalization, of which we are currently a part. Sir Thomas More writes Utopia. Machiavelli writes The Prince. What these events have in common are the creation of nation states, the Renaissance, the exploration of the world, discovery of other parts of the world, an expansion of knowledge unlike virtually any other in the history of the world. And I would argue that Florida is representative of that era. And as we learn our history, as we appreciate these 500 years, we are asserting our place not only in the American narrative, in the American historical narrative, but also in the narrative of world history. And as a result, the Florida Humanities Council sees this as a teachable moment of a millennium. It is my pleasure to introduce representative of our foremost colleague in this enterprise, the state of Florida and the Department of State, its Deputy Secretary, Carrie Post.
Thank you, Andy. And good morning. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be here with y'all this morning on behalf of Florida Secretary of State Ken Detzner. As Andy said, this truly is a remarkable moment. I mean, this is the first time in modern memory that Florida as a state is actually promoting and highlighting our history and cultural heritage. More than 500 years, although we know that Florida has been inhabited for more than 12,000 years. This is a tremendous opportunity before us. In 2010, Governor Scott designated the Florida Department of State as the lead agency for the Viva Florida 500 initiative. However, there is no dedicated funding. So we are all about partnerships. Everything we do is partnerships and leveraging resources. Let me see if I can get this to work. Oops. And what you'll see here is at cabinet meeting last month, Viva Florida 500 was acknowledged with a resolution, and I just want to show you, so just get you an idea of some of the partnerships that we've been working with. The Florida Lottery, they produced a Viva Florida 500 ticket called Florida Treasure Hunt. That is their best-selling $3 ticket ever. But what is so cool about it, not just promoting Viva Florida 500, the online Second Chance game highlights more than 300 historic sites and archaeological sites around the state. So it's also very much a teaching tool. Visit Florida has also been a great partner in the Viva Florida 500 initiative. Again, when you don't have funding, you've got to partner and leverage where it makes sense. And the Florida Department of Transportation was another great partner you might have seen in your areas of the state. The Viva Florida 500 sites going up, it's a Viva Florida 500 sign that is going up on historic sites all around the state. So they've been a great partner. Department of Agriculture, Florida State Parks, again, you can see them all up here, and of course, the Florida Humanities Council. They have been a partner in the Viva Florida 500 initiative since day one. And the resources that they're providing for teachers is just spectacular. So we've been very, very grateful to be partnering with them on Viva Florida 500 since the inception. State universities have also played a significant role in Viva Florida 500, including, and of course, as Andy referenced, University of Florida, the preeminent historian Michael Gannon. He started the early myth-busting, if you will, of the common perception of what Florida's history was. And so he's been great in building on the great work of that. Is from the University of South Florida is Dr. Michael Francis, and I have to share this. I'm a USF alum, full disclosure, and in my alumni magazine that I just got 2 days ago showcases Dr. Michael Francis and his truly groundbreaking work on what he is doing to preserve and digitize some of these documents from the 1500s. There is more information on Florida than any other state in the country, so he's working with St. Augustine here, going to Spain, doing some groundbreaking work. So this was really cool, very timely too, I might add. University of West Florida has been a leader in this initiative for a very long time, actually. Their groundbreaking, I shouldn't say groundbreaking, underwater archaeology that they've known with the Spanish galleons. They have been truly leaders in underwater archaeology, and the Spanish galleons that are in Pensacola Bay, talking about this, getting the conversation started. The Florida Public Archaeology Network, which is also run from the University of West Florida, but connects to 5 other universities in the state. So again, I mean, Florida's history goes back 12,000 years, so it is imperative that we work with our university partners in the Florida Public Archaeology Network to help interpret, preserve, and protect those sites. They also, I got to do a quick shout out for Next Exit History program that they do. It is an app. I encourage you to check it out. Anywhere you're driving around the entire state of Florida, it's Next Exit History. Will tell you what historic sites are in the area. So again, they've made Florida's history and heritage very accessible. So state universities have clearly been key partners. As Andy said, next week is Viva Week. It is a big week. While we do know when Ponce de Leon landed, we don't know where he landed. Actually, I think there are 4 cities that are claiming him. I think 4 historic markers, and that's great. Let's start the conversation. But Viva Florida 500 is really a year-long initiative. But next week, you're going to be hearing and seeing a lot more about it. We currently have more than 1,500 partners that we work with from all over the state. At local levels, there's almost 400 events that are posted on the website. I encourage you to check out vivaflorida.org It is the official Viva Florida 500 website. So that's for all things Viva. You'll see there's an education section. And in closing, I'd like to thank you all for what you do every day, and thank you for encouraging universities' participation in not only advancing Florida's history and cultural heritage, but really helping to utilize this opportunity we have before us right now, not just in 2013, but through 2015 and always. So thank you very much, and I'm now going to turn it back over to Steve Seibert. Thank you.
So my nephew lives in Virginia, and he sends me a Facebook post yesterday from Jamestown, where America began, it says on the note. And I chided him very quickly. America began here, it began in Florida. This is our opportunity with a variety of partners to bring a focus and to sort of launch us into the next 500 years, so consistent with the conversation that I heard this morning with the speaker, so consistent with the excitement in higher education. It is a thoughtful process. You see in front of you the special issue of Forum Magazine. Forum Magazine is a treasure in this state. It's put out by the Florida Humanities Council. This is thousands of copies of this have gone out. I did want to hit one website that I really want you to see. We've got lots of information. We get pretty jazzed here. But personally, everyone, if you would write down teachingflorida.org. This is a website for K through 12. My son is 15. He's written 3 reports based on teachingflorida.org. It is interactive, it's exciting, it's wonderful, and it's available to everyone in the state, everyone in the world, but everyone in the state. Every child can get a really interesting look at the history of this magnificent place. So with that, I would like to echo everyone's thoughts of thanking you and your member institutions for your engagement. I would ask you to, there's no ask here, by the way, other than thank you, and well, actually, if you wanted to get really excited about this and engage more, that would be great. Let me close by saying one thing. On our board of directors, and boards are important entities, but on our board, our chair is John Belalovic from the University of South Florida, Professor John. We've got Margot Stringfield from the University of West Florida in the Archaeological Institute that's there, magnificent woman. Dr. Colburn from the University of Florida is on our board. So we take this stuff really seriously, and we're being thoughtful. I will mention one last thing. This is a commemoration. This is a commemoration. We spent a lot of time not calling it a celebration. It is a commemoration, trying to be respectful that this is not a European-centric concept, that this is a pivot point in history, as Andy said, but also recognizing our Hispanic partners in all of this, our African American partners, the tribes of Florida. We're trying to engage everyone in a thoughtful discussion about our history and where we go from here. With that, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
I very much appreciate you stopping by and bringing us up to date on the work of the Humanities Council in Viva Florida. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is Governor Tripp, the Academic and Student Affairs Committee report.
Thank you. Now I have to pull this back up. 1 second.
Let me skip you.
Yeah, skip me because
Governor Morton, are you ready to do audit?
Yes.
Okay.
I've got to get it up here.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead and do the audit report committee.
Good morning. Alan, do you want to say anything before I begin with the report of our committee meeting yesterday afternoon?
You got it. Thanks, Ed.
Okay, with your permission then, I'll take off. Yesterday afternoon, our Audit and Compliance Committee met, and we had, I think, a very extensive and productive conversation. Before the committee really commenced action, Chair Levine commented on the corrective action plan excuse me, for Florida A&M in response to the Attorney General's operational audit and the board officers and the Inspector General on the anti-hazing program report of investigation, as well as a number of the other reviews that have been conducted regarding university policies and operations. He commented that he believes that the issues which have been identified involve a host of things, including governance and other issues, and that he strongly recommended that all of us stay in close communication with Florida A&M University, its audits chair, and its board, so that we stay on top of the situation. We then called upon the Chancellor to give us an update on the process of the implementation and monitoring of Florida A&M's corrective plan of action. He did so. We addressed a draft, a series of programmatic metrics that were brought together by President Robinson and by Chair Badger, who briefed us on those particular metrics in addition to the Chancellor. One of the suggestions we had made during the process of the meeting was that we begin to assign specific accountability and timelines. Yesterday afternoon after the meeting, President Robinson informed me that that indeed has been done and in fact is going to be integrated into the process itself. Once the Chancellor had completed his report, President Robinson in turn reviewed the same materials, assured the committee that everybody on his team is doing everything that they can to work toward an appropriate conclusion. We also talked about the SACS accreditation and the importance of those processes that are underway. Again, the board chair, Solomon Badger, believes that the university will successfully complete the various plans of corrective action. He indicated that the process, in response to a question from the Board of Governors, that he believed the process would be completed within 12 to 18 months, and that the university would submit a written report to SACS sometime in the neighborhood of August of this year. We expect a site visit sometime in September, and a decision from SACS as respects that visit will probably occur between then and the end of the calendar year. We then moved on for information to a matrix again that had been presented, and I think the Board of Governors gave some input into that corrective matrix, and we will be receiving in the future, I think, information from the Florida A&M representatives on the status of those particular metrics. We then moved on as a committee and we reviewed a committee dashboard, which is really a delineation of the scope of responsibilities of the members of the audit committee of the Board of Governors. And the chair and the staff, the chancellor, have looked at the various capabilities and the opportunity for certain members of the audit committee to take on certain functions. They were recommended in that draft dashboard, and we'll continue to have some dialogue as that is finalized over the next 30 to 60 days. We then received a report from the Inspector General. Derry Harper provided our committee with a complete overview of the Audit Committee's roles, its responsibilities. In addition, he provided us with a PowerPoint presentation containing the information which was also in our materials packet and enumerated in the Audit and Compliance Committee charter. And we had, I thought, a reasonable discussion as respects that, and we will, together as a committee and as members of the Board of Governors, move forward into the future with that as guidance and counsel as respects how the Audit Committee will conduct its matters. We did not take any formal action other than approving the minutes of prior meetings. There were no action items, and that would conclude my report.
Great. Any questions of Governor Morton? If not, we'll move on. Governor Tripp, academic
Thank you,
affairs.
Mr. Chairman. I apologize for not being ready at time, but I am now ready. We had a meeting yesterday, and we first talked about having Jan Ignash gave us an update on the academic program approval process in the state university system to educate the new members on what the process is and what the committee function is. Following that, we had an update on the academic program coordination work group by Dr. Tony Waldrop, Provost of the University of Central Florida. We then took up the issue of limited access status for the Bachelor of Social Work at the University of Florida, and that requires board action. And I would like to move that we approve limited status for the Bachelor of Social Work, University of North Florida, CIP code 44.0701.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion on this? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The lights on, motion passes. Anything further?
The last thing is Governor Cortez Watley presented us at a later time in the meeting an update on the Florida Student Association and the SUS Council for Student Affairs, and we had nothing further than that. Thank you, sir.
Governor Beard, Facilities.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have two action items, both of them bond issues, and both of these issues were thoroughly discussed, I would say, and vetted, and we had 2 unanimous votes to approve them. And so I'd like to make a motion to resolution of the Board of Governors requesting the Division of Bond Finance of the State Board of Administration to issue revenue bonds on behalf of Florida State University to finance construction of a student residence facility. That's my motion.
We have a motion, we have a second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Second resolution is the resolution of the Board of Governors requesting the Division of Bond Finance of the State Board of Administration to issue revenue bonds on behalf of Florida International University to finance construction of a parking garage.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
We had 2 other issues on our committee meeting. The first was we asked the Chancellor to put together a drafting group to work on the debt guidelines that will be modified in the next over the next legislative session and modified for the governor's request. And lastly, the legislative budget request we would normally bonify, but we don't have the information yet, so there's no action on that part.
Great. Thank you, sir.
That's my report.
Thank you, sir. Governor Kuntz, Budget and Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a short meeting. We do have 2 items that need action by the full board. Before I go over those quickly, I did want to report out that we have asked staff to get with each of the universities on the final development of the performance-based metrics and to conclude that by June 1st, at which time we would probably need a unscheduled at this point meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee, and possibly, with your approval, a conference meeting of the full board. And so we will be in touch on that. But that's what we've asked the staff and the universities to do. And as far as the 2 items requiring action by this board, the first is in January, the board approved the public notice of intent to amend Regulation 18.001 purchasing. This regulation, just as a refresher for the board, was amended to incorporate 2012 statutory changes by adding a section on printing price preferences for Florida-based vendors and asking universities to review existing contracts in an effort to achieve a 5% savings, and strengthening the existing donation language by prohibiting a university employee of direct support or direct support organization from soliciting donations during a vendor selection process. So this was noticed at our previous meeting. There were no public comments received, and I would move the board to approve this.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And the final one which the committee did take up today and approved unanimously. Pursuant to bond covenants, the committee reviewed the 2013 and 14 income and expenditure statements for several university auxiliary facilities, and I would like to move the full board approve the 2013 and 14 operating budget for these auxiliary facilities.
Any motion? So we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Governor Hussaini, trustee nominating development.
Mr. Chairman, Committee on Trustee met this morning, and I move that the board reappoint Jorge Luis Arizata to the Florida International University Board of Trustees for a term beginning March 28, 2013 and ending January 6, 2018. This appointment would be subject to confirmation by the Senate and to Mr. Arizata attending an orientation if he has not attended an orientation in the past year.
We have a motion. We have a second. We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board appoint Beverly Jo Say to the University of Central Florida Board of Trustees for a term beginning March 28, 2013 and ending January 6, 2018. This appointment would be subject to confirmation by the Senate and to Ms. Say attending an orientation session.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I move that the board appoint Nancy Hemingway Watkins to the University of South Florida Board of Trustees for a term beginning March 28, 2013 and ending January 6, 2016. This appointment would be subject to confirmation by the Senate and to Ms. Watkins attending an orientation session.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, this completes our report.
Okay.